Flames licked the Lagos sky, bold and hungry, painting horror across the dark horizon. Neighbors screamed, water buckets sloshed, and someone shouted for help. But Adesewa Owolabi stood still, frozen in the soft drizzle, her chest caving in as smoke rose from the only thing she had ever truly built. Her café, Sewa's Nest, a charming glass and wood structure nestled on a quiet corner of Lekki Phase 1, was no more than a glowing inferno now. She had just stepped out to buy pepper soup from Mama Ifeanyi down the road. 15 minutes. That's all it took for everything to turn to ash. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla, once so comforting, now clung to the air like grief. Firefighters yelled instructions as they battled the flames, but their voices blurred into the background. She tried to run inside. Her mother's recipe book was still on the counter, her handwritten legacy wrapped in a faded Ankara cloth. A firm hand gripped her back and yanked her away. "It's not safe, madam. Stay back," she screamed, not in words, but with her entire soul. Sewa's Nest wasn't just a business. It was a monument to her mother, Adesewa Owolabi, the woman who taught her how to bake by candlelight during PHCN blackouts in Ibadan. Her mother had whispered dreams between measurements of flour and prayers over burnt pastries. After she passed from a sudden stroke 7 years ago, Adesewa poured every saved naira, every borrowed favor, every waking dream into building the café. She had walked away from a high-paying consulting job to do this. She had bet everything on memory. Now, the windows she cleaned every morning shattered from the heat. The handcrafted menu board was engulfed. The mosaic coffee table her staff helped her build was gone. She watched her past and future crumble together into glowing embers. By dawn, the fire was out. The building stood in skeletal silence, soaked in ash and regret. Strips of yellow tape fluttered in the breeze like flags marking a battlefield. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Customers, staff, curious strangers who had seen clips of the fire circulating online. She didn't answer any of them. Jide showed up around noon. He stood awkwardly by the ruins, dressed too well for the occasion in a silk shirt and cologne that was too sharp for the morning air. "I heard," he said, voice low. "I'm sorry." She didn't look at him. "You hated this cafe." "I didn't hate it," he replied. "I just never saw the point of you throwing away a stable life for flour." Her lips pressed into a bitter smile. "Well, the flower has burned. Congratulations." He left quietly after that. Maybe he thought he was offering condolences. Maybe he thought this tragedy proved him right. Back in her cramped studio apartment, the silence felt heavier than fire. She sat on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, listening to old voice notes her mother left her years ago. They were mundane things, tips on baking, puff puff, a Yoruba prayer before the new year, a reminder to always clean the oven coils. But in the soft, crackly tones, her mother sounded so alive, so nearby. Tears came slowly. She didn't fight them. She fell asleep on the floor with her phone still playing her mother's voice, her apron bunched in her hand, smelling faintly of nutmeg. By the time the sun dipped again, Lagos had moved on. The city buzzed with its own rhythm, indifferent to individual heartbreak. But Adesewa didn't move. She kept thinking about the flour, the recipes, the smell of the cafe at 6 a.m. when she baked banana bread. The girls she had trained, Miriam, Said, Bisola, where would they go now? Something twisted in her chest. She got up slowly and walked to her fridge. She pulled out a cracked notepad with old scribbles of cake ratios. Her hand trembled as she picked up a pen and wrote just 4 words. "Mama, I'm not done." That night, she stayed up, staring out the window. The glow of distant traffic blurred behind her tears. Then, just before midnight, a sound at the door. She turned, alert. Slipped under the crack of the door was a piece of fine ivory stationery. The paper looked expensive. The handwriting was elegant, slanted, confident. She picked it up, heart skipping. One line. "Let's talk about rebuilding. Zed." The note felt like it didn't belong in her world. Too polished, too calm for the chaos her life had become. The paper was thick, the kind used for wedding invitations or business deals between powerful men. The handwriting was perfect, clean, artistic strokes. It was only one line, but it carried a weight she couldn't name. Let's talk about rebuilding. Z. Z. Who was Z? She didn't know anyone with a name that began with Z. Her first thought was a prank, or worse, a pity move from one of the many strangers who had seen her cry on TikTok. She'd gone viral without wanting to. Clips of her screaming for the recipe book, being held back by firefighters, tears streaming down her soot-covered face. The internet had turned her loss into content. But something about the note felt intentional. She turned it over. No contact number, no address, just the backside of luxury. The next morning, a second note arrived, this time delivered by a hotel concierge in a sleek black uniform. The note was an invitation. Tomorrow, 11 a.m., Cielo Lounge. Ask for Obatunde. Cielo Lounge was a minimalist rooftop cafe at a boutique hotel in Victoria Island. Glass walls, white orchids, and the faint scent of oud in the air. She'd only been there once, on her 30th birthday. A place like that didn't belong to her current life, the one riddled with ash, silence, and unpaid rent. Still, curiosity was a hard thing to silence. At exactly 11:03 a.m., she stepped through the glass doors of the lounge, her chest tight with uncertainty. He was already waiting. Zain Obatunde, 35, dark-skinned, clean-shaven, with eyes that seemed like they'd seen far too much. He stood up as she approached, dressed in a navy blue tailored suit and a plain white shirt, simple but devastatingly elegant. His smile was soft, but his expression gave nothing away. "Miss Owolabi," he said, as if her name had weight. "Thank you for coming." Adesewa nodded slowly, eyes narrowing. "You left me a note." "I did," he said, motioning for her to sit. "I wasn't sure you would respond." She looked around the lounge. "Places like this usually come with strings." A quiet chuckle. "I don't deal in strings, just stories." She sat down, not relaxing. "I had coffee at your cafe," he said, 3 weeks before the fire. "Your almond croissant was the best I've had since Paris. But that's not what stayed with me." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a photo, an old one, faded. It was of her counter, with a blurry silhouette of her arranging cupcakes, her apron tied crookedly. "I was in a dark place that day," he continued. "I walked in, intending nothing. And somehow, your space, your pastries, your presence, reset something in me." She looked at the photo, and then back at him. "So this is—" "What? A thank you?" He paused, searching her expression. "It's a tribute, an offering. I want to rebuild Sewa's nest, not as a business opportunity, not as charity, as memory, mine, and yours." Adesewa blinked. The words were too large, too impossible. "Why? What's in it for you?" Zain tilted his head slightly, then leaned forward. "I invest in healing. Mine was quiet. Yours was visible. You gave me something when you didn't even know it. I'm just trying to return that favor." She stared at him, something shifting in her chest. "What do you want in return?" she asked finally. "Nothing," he said. Then added, "Except to be part of the rebirth. I won't own it. I don't want profit. I just want to see it live again, with you behind the counter." Adesewa's hands trembled under the table. "People don't offer this kind of thing. Not without a reason." Zain met her eyes, and for a moment she felt like he was looking right into her history. "I'm investing," he said softly, "in what healed me once." That line struck deeper than she expected. The meeting ended without promises. He gave her a file of preliminary architectural sketches, clean, open spaces, greenery, a wall for photos. She held it close, unsure why she didn't throw it away. She didn't say yes, she didn't say no. She walked out of that hotel with too many thoughts crashing inside her. Was he real? Was this real? Or was it just another version of Jide? Sophisticated control masked as care. But beneath the storm of questions, something lingered, a presence, a pull. That night, she barely touched her dinner. She sat by the window again, her apartment cold from unpaid bills. She opened the file and stared at the designs. Then, sometime after midnight, she fell asleep, head resting on the sketches. In her dream, Sewa's nest stood whole again. Warm light spilled from the windows, laughter echoed from within, and the scent of vanilla floated in the air. Behind the counter, she saw him, Zain. His sleeves were rolled up, flour dusted his arms. And he was looking at her, like they'd built this place together once before. The ruins still smelled of smoke and sorrow, the air thick with memories only she could smell. Cracked walls reached into the sky like pleading hands. Ash lined the earth like a forgotten prayer. Adesewa stood there again, as she had every day since the fire, trying to understand how something so beautiful could vanish so quickly. Then came the sound of tires on gravel. A sleek, black SUV pulled up quietly. Zain stepped out in a casual gray sweater and slacks, 2 cups of steaming coffee in his hands. No driver, no entourage. Just him and his ever-present calm. "I figured you'd be here," he said, offering her a cup. She took it without a word. The smell hit her first. Hazelnut with a splash of vanilla. Exactly how she used to brew it at Siwa's nest. He handed her a folder next. "I wanted to show you something." Inside were designs, crisp, detailed architectural plans. But they weren't cold or corporate. They breathed. The layout resembled her old cafe, but felt elevated. Warm wood textures. A rooftop garden where people could sip tea beneath the stars. Eco-lighting that changed with mood and time. A curated art wall for local artists to display rotating pieces. Intimate booths. Sunlight-friendly glass walls. Even a children's corner, like the one her mother used to talk about building. Adesewa blinked back the sting behind her eyes. "You remembered everything," she whispered. "No," he said. "You told me everything. I just listened." They walked through the ruins together. Her fingers traced the charred remains of the service counter. She pointed to where the cinnamon rolls used to sit. Told him about her mother's special puff-puff recipe, and the morning an entire bridal party showed up without warning, and she served them with a fever and no staff. Zain didn't interrupt. He just listened, nodding occasionally, asking small, meaningful questions. He never tried to rush her story. Never assumed he already understood. "Adesewa," he said finally, turning to face her fully. "This should be yours, your vision. I'll fund everything, but I want you to lead. No conditions, no equity, no pressure." She stared at him, stunned. "You're giving me creative control?" He smiled softly. "I'm not giving you anything. I'm just not taking what was never mine." Pride warred with possibility inside her chest. Could she accept this? Could she let a stranger help her rise again? Would that make her weak or wise? "I'll think about it," she said quietly. And she did. All weekend. She stayed up late sketching possible. New layouts on napkins. Dreaming of muffin varieties named after emotions. Googling plant species that could survive Lagos weather on a rooftop. By Monday, she called him. "Let's build something," she said. They began slowly. Days blurred into weeks as they met at the site every morning, sometimes for hours. They debated color palettes, tile textures, and table arrangements. He'd send her Pinterest boards at 2 a.m. She'd leave him voice notes, asking for mood lighting ideas during his meetings. There were arguments, like whether to include a full bakery kitchen or stick to the cafe model. But even those felt alive. Intimate, like they were shaping something that mattered, not just to the city, but to each other. One afternoon, while flipping through fabric swatches under a makeshift tent, his hand brushed hers as they both reached for the same deep maroon sample. Neither of them moved for a second. The silence stretched between them like string, tight, trembling, tender. She looked up and found him already watching her. "You have flour on your cheek," he said, voice soft. She blushed, laughing nervously, brushing it off. But her heart hadn't laughed with her. It thudded, hard and loud. By now, Ijoma had noticed everything. "Are we going to ignore the sexual tension thick enough to frost a cake?" she teased one evening over suya and maltina. Adesewa rolled her eyes. "He's just different." "Girl, different is how it starts. Don't act like he's not fine." Adesewa couldn't argue. Zain was fine. But it wasn't just his looks. It was how he saw her, through the grief, the fire, the soot, and the silence. No one had done that in a long time, maybe ever. Still, she kept things professional. Mostly. Until that evening she returned to the site alone to drop off some documents. She wandered into the skeleton of what would become her new storage room and saw a faded box tucked behind a collapsed shelf. Curious, she pulled it out, dusted it off, and opened it. Inside were old laminated photos her staff had forgotten to take home after the fire. She shuffled through them, smiling faces, pastries lined on wooden boards, customers with their kids. Then she froze. One photo, taken months ago, showed her mother standing in front of the original Siwa's nest, arms crossed, smiling like she'd just won the lottery. But it wasn't just her mother. In the blurry background, near the corner of the frame, stood a man, tall, dark-skinned, in a navy blue shirt. Zain. He had been there, before the fire, before the offer, before everything. Her fingers trembled as she held the photo closer to her face, blinking once, twice. There he was, Zain. Not the sharply dressed man in a designer suit and measured voice she had come to know, but younger, softer, less sure of himself, still tall, still striking. But there was something unguarded in his posture, as if life had cornered him and he hadn't figured out how to fight back yet. The photo was at least 7 years old, and he had been standing in the background, outside her mother's stall at a local food fair. She remembered that day vividly. Her mother had just launched her mini pop-up bakery at a community event in Surulere. It had rained, attendance was low, and her mother gave away most of the baked goods rather than pack them up unsold. So Zain hadn't just stumbled upon Siwa's nest after the fire. He had known her mother. She pressed the photo to her chest, breath caught in her throat. The next morning, she waited for him at the site. He arrived in his usual quiet way, holding a clipboard and a cappuccino for her. She didn't take it this time. She simply handed him the photograph. He went still. "I found it yesterday," she said quietly. His eyes scanned the image, and something flickered in them. Recognition, yes, but also reverence, memory. "You were there," she said. He nodded slowly. "I was. Why didn't you tell me?" Zain set down the cup and sat on the edge of a cement block, his tone dropping lower than usual. "I was 28. My first company had just failed. Investors pulled out. My rent was 3 months due, my car had been repossessed, and I hadn't eaten all day. I wandered into that food fair thinking maybe I'd find something cheap enough to eat and a place to hide from my failure." He looked up at her, then back at the photo. "Your mother was the only vendor still smiling, even though it was raining and barely anyone showed up. I stood there like a fool, trying to act like I was browsing. She handed me a cupcake and said, 'Oya, take it, it's free. You look like someone who needs to remember that life can be sweet again.'" Adesewa covered her mouth, heart thudding. "She didn't ask for anything," he continued. "Just gave it to me with a wink and told me, 'Whatever you're running from, go and build something sweet with the pain.'" He exhaled, long and slow. That line stayed with me. I ate the cupcake under a tree, and by the time I finished it, I had the idea for my second tech platform. It wasn't just food, it was hope. I never forgot that woman. He turned his eyes to hers, and for once they were completely unguarded. "But I didn't know she was your mother. Not until I saw the name Siwa's Nest and heard you say her full name that day in the ruins. I couldn't believe it, that the woman who changed the course of my life had raised you." Adesewa's throat tightened. Her mother's memory hung thick in the air between them. She took a step closer, voice barely above a whisper. "So all of this, wasn't just chance." He shook his head. "No, this was full circle." They stood in the shell of what once was, surrounded by concrete dust and dreams. The broken walls, the cracked floor, the echo of heat still lingering. It all seemed to hush as silence pressed in. Adesewa looked down at the blueprint, in his hand. Her fingers reached for the edge. I thought I was alone in carrying her legacy, she said. You were never alone, he replied, voice rough. I've been carrying a part of her with me all this time. I just didn't know it had your smile. The words hung, raw and electric. He stepped closer, and so did she, inches between them. Her breath caught again, but this time not in fear or shock. She could feel it now, the invisible line stretching between them, a thread woven from memory, loss, rebuilding, and something deeper. He reached up slowly, brushing a loose curl from her cheek. I didn't come back for the cupcakes, he said. I came back for you. Her eyes widened slightly, her lips parted. The ground didn't shake, but something inside her did. Their faces leaned in, breath mingling, hearts racing. And then, Ada? The voice cut the air like a blade. They both turned, standing a few feet away, on the edge of the construction site, dressed in his signature smugness and designer sneakers, was Zain, holding a leather portfolio. I heard you're rebuilding, he said, stepping forward. Thought I'd offer my help. Adesewa took a full step back, her spine straightening. Zain's jaw tightened. Zain smiled at them both, oblivious. Or perhaps not. Long time, Ada. Let's talk business. Zain's smile stretched wide, the kind that always knew how to fill a room, even when it wasn't invited. He held the leather portfolio in one hand, his other casually tucked into the pocket of slim-fit trousers that screamed, I'm doing well. His designer fragrance arrived before his words did, strong, intentional, intrusive. I'm glad I caught you, he said, eyes flicking between Adesewa and Zain. I heard the phoenix is rising. Adesewa didn't respond immediately. She felt like she'd been yanked from a private, delicate thread, one woven with memory and possibility, only to be dropped into a storm of old tension. Zain stood next to her, motionless, his calm turning distant. Zain wasted no time. He flipped open the portfolio and laid out proposal pages on a concrete ledge as if this were a boardroom. I've got partners, influencer marketing specialists, a whole rebranding crew. We'll take Sewa's Nest to the next level. Nationwide delivery, custom packaging, virtual cooking classes. It's not just a cafe anymore, Ada. It's a brand. She flinched at the old nickname. He used to whisper it to her after fights, as if shortening her name could erase the damage. You think people want small anymore? He continued. They want story. They want scale. We can give them both. Zain remained silent, his eyes steady on Zain, but unreadable. Adesewa crossed her arms. What do you get out of this? Zain grinned. A chance to redeem myself, maybe, and to help you win, like you always deserved. Her throat tightened. There had been a time she thought she would marry Zain, when he whispered dreams into her ear and told her they'd build empires together. But somewhere along the line, his empire stopped needing her. He cheated with ambition first, then with a model named Shade. Zain finally spoke. You're not interested in rebuilding the cafe. You're interested in owning the narrative. Zain chuckled, slow and condescending. And you? Silent investor with a savior complex? What are your terms? Zain's jaw twitched. None. That's the difference. The silence between the two men stretched taut. Ijoma showed up later that day, pulled into the drama via WhatsApp voice notes and emotional shorthand only best friends understood. You cannot be serious, she said, her mouth full of chin-chin as she sprawled on Adesewa's couch. Don't let the devil back in just because he's wearing cologne. I just want to hear him out, Adesewa said quietly. Ijoma narrowed her eyes. You're playing with fire. Zain is calm, yes, but he's not cold. He pulled back the second Zain stepped in. And he had. Zain no longer sent morning coffee, no longer stayed to argue about tile colors. His emails came late. His tone turned formal. I don't want to interfere in choices that affect your future, he said one afternoon as they stood beside the newly installed cafe windows. I'm just here to support whatever path you choose. It felt like being handed a goodbye wrapped in silk. Adesewa stood at the edge of everything, one hand reaching for her past, the other uncertain of her present. She wasn't sure who she was without her grief, without her pain. But Zain had seen that pain and honored it. Jide had once exploited it. Still, the questions wouldn't leave her alone. What if Jide had changed? What if this was his version of redemption? What if Zain was too good to be true? That evening, she met with Jide at a quiet lounge on Bourdieu. He ordered for her, still assuming he knew her tastes. She let him talk about brand identity, capital injections, scalable models. But beneath the boardroom language was something else: regret. "I messed up," he said finally. "You were the only real thing in my life. I see that now." She didn't reply. Not immediately. She looked out the window at the blur of headlights below. The city pulsed, alive and restless, just like her heart. "I'm not that girl anymore," she said softly, "and I don't know if I want to be in anyone's shadow again." Jide reached across the table. She didn't take his hand. That night, as she walked into her apartment and kicked off her shoes, her phone buzzed. One message. From Zain. "If you choose him, I disappear. No hard feelings, no explanations, just silence." She sat on the edge of her bed, the weight of the decision pressing down like smoke she thought she'd escaped. It wasn't about business anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. The sound of hammers and drills filled the air, a symphony of reconstruction that should have brought joy. Beam by beam, Sewa's nest was rising again, walls sturdy, windows wide, paint swatches tested in golden morning light. Yet amid the hum of progress, Adesewa felt something else growing too. Distance, quiet, unspoken, but undeniable. Zain was pulling away. They still met occasionally at the site, nodding over contractor updates, exchanging brief suggestions about finishes and furniture. But his words had grown clipped. The lightness between them, the inside jokes about cinnamon buns and his habit of overanalyzing tile color, was gone. And when he wasn't physically present, he was unreachable. No calls, no late-night texts, only polite, scheduled messages through his assistant. Meanwhile, Jide was doing the opposite, showing up everywhere, all the time. He came with color-coded proposals and aggressive marketing ideas. Premium pastry boxes for weddings, he said, influencer collaborations with food vloggers, and luxury rebranding to push up pricing. He plastered renderings of the cafe on social media without asking her permission, framing it as a new Lagos movement. His captions oozed sleek ambition. Old flavor, new fire. Get ready for the rebirth of sweet. Adesewa tried to keep pace, but it was like trying to bake with ingredients that didn't belong. She watched her vision being twisted into something shinier, louder, less intimate. She didn't want Sewa's nest to become another Instagrammable moment. She wanted it to remain what it was, memory wrapped in warmth, a place that breathed healing. One afternoon, after Jide introduced a deal with a juice company to co-brand the menu, she pulled Ijoma aside. "This isn't what I wanted," she whispered. "He's turning the cafe into a billboard." Ijoma frowned, folding her arms. "Then why are you letting him?" Adesewa looked away. "Because the alternative is silence." "Zain," she nodded. Ijoma sighed. "Ada, I need to tell you something. I saw him at the Arise Foundation Gala last weekend." Adesewa looked up sharply. "Zain?" "He was there, with a woman. Light-skinned, tall, expensive gown. Looked like they belonged on a magazine cover." The words hit like a brick. "He didn't even tell me he was back in Lagos," Adesewa said quietly. "He didn't have to," Ijoma replied gently. "He gave you a choice. And maybe, just maybe, he believed you made it." That night, Adesewa didn't sleep. She wandered her kitchen in a daze, eventually reaching for flour. She hadn't baked in weeks, too consumed with business meetings and brand pitches. Now, she moved like a woman possessed. Eggs cracked into ceramic bowls, cinnamon spilled into sugar. Her hands mixed with desperation, each motion a silent scream. The oven warmed the space, but not her heart. By 3 a.m., the counters were littered with cooling trays and broken memories. In the back of a flour tin, while looking for more nutmeg, her fingers brushed something unexpected, a folded slip of paper, slightly yellowed. She pulled it out and unfolded it slowly, heart pounding. It was a note, written in the same clean, slanted handwriting she'd seen once on expensive stationery. But this one was older, from months ago, dated just 2 weeks after Zain's first visit to Sewa's nest, long before the fire. Thank you for the coffee and the silence. I don't know what you've built here, but it's healing something in me I didn't know was broken. If I ever find the courage to speak, maybe I'll tell you why. Until then, thank you for seeing me without even knowing it. Z. Her hands shook. She sat down on the kitchen stool, clutching the paper like a lifeline. So much had passed between them, flames, dreams, silence, heartbreak, but this note stripped it all bare. He had been speaking from the beginning. She'd just never fully listened. Tears blurred her vision as she reread the note, again and again. Then something clicked, an old memory. Their first late-night conversation after her cafe burned, when she'd asked what kept him grounded. He had mentioned the jacaranda tree near the lagoon. My quiet place, he'd called it, where I go when I'm trying to figure out who I am without the noise. Her breath hitched. She flipped the note over, wondering if there was more. And there, scribbled faintly on the back, in pen, running low on ink, "When you're ready to heal, I'll be waiting under the jacaranda tree." She clutched the note to her chest. For the first time in weeks, she knew exactly where she needed to go. The sky was still blushing with the pale colors of dawn when Adesewa stepped out of the cab, her breath visible in the cool, early air. The city hadn't quite woken up. Buses were silent. Horns hadn't yet begun their daily chorus. The soft rustling of jacaranda leaves was the only sound, fluttering like whispered secrets above her. She walked slowly toward the lagoon's edge, heart hammering. And there he was, Zain, leaning against the thick trunk of the jacaranda tree, his silhouette framed by the soft purple blooms and the fading night. He wasn't dressed like a billionaire today, just jeans, a plain black hoodie, and quiet eyes that saw too much. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come," he said, his voice low. She walked until they were only inches apart. "You left a note," she said, and silence. I finally read both. A small, tired smile curved his lips. "I didn't want to interfere," he said. "When I saw Jide back in your world, I thought maybe I was just a visitor passing through." "You weren't," she said, her voice steady. He looked down for a second, then back at her. "The woman from the gala. It was my cousin, Aisha. She flew in from London for the foundation. She needed an escort to the event, and I—" She raised a hand, silencing him. "You don't need to explain. I should have asked." Silence hung, not heavy this time, but sacred. He stepped closer. "Adesewa, I didn't come to build a cafe you'd grow to hate. I came to help build a world you'd love." Her heart cracked open. "I want that world," she whispered, "with you in it." Their lips met slowly, like a question asked and finally answered. Not desperate, not rushed, just gentle, hesitant. Like two people who'd lived too long with ghosts and were finally learning how to breathe again. The kiss deepened, and in it were 1,000 unsaid words. Grief for the past, gratitude for the now, trembling hope for the future. When they parted, their foreheads rested together. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The next day, Zain returned to the cafe site, not as a distant investor, but as a partner once more. And Adesewa returned with him, not just as a baker, but as a builder of dreams. Everything moved faster after that. Construction accelerated. New windows gleamed in the morning light. Wooden counters were carved with care. A soft, earthy paint warmed the walls. Every detail felt intentional, like a tribute to all they had survived. Zain surprised her one afternoon by bringing in a local artist from Yaba, someone her mother used to support. Together, they unveiled a stunning mural that stretched across the back wall of the cafe. Her mother, captured in brush and color, smiling down at trays of puff puff and chin chin, eyes full of life. Adesewa cried when she saw it. "This is the heart of the cafe," she whispered. Zain only nodded, hand wrapped gently around hers. She started writing again, too, this time not in napkin margins, but in a leather-bound notebook Zain gave her, embossed with gold foil. The title came to her easily. Baking Through Fire. It would be more than recipes. It would be memory, metaphor, survival, a journey through loss, batter, and healing. Together, they shaped not just a space, but a future. The cafe became more than what it once was. It grew roots in community, identity, and quiet defiance. It was hers, theirs, and her mother's spirit lived in every tile, every corner. Finally, after months of work, the announcement went out: grand reopening of Sewa's Nest, this Sunday. Excitement spread fast. Influencers requested invites. Food bloggers called. Local news stations asked for interviews. Adesewa stood outside the almost finished building one evening, breathing in the scent of paint and newness, her heart full. That's when she saw the envelope. It was tucked between the gate slats, plain brown, sealed with wax. No name. She opened it. Inside was a legal notice, stamped and signed. Zain had filed a claim of ownership, alleging breach of a verbal MOU, demanding 40% control of the cafe. Her hands shook. The dream they had rebuilt, was it about to burn again? 3 hours before the grand reopening, the world shifted beneath Adesewa's feet. The cafe was aglow. Staff in matching aprons, soft jazz testing the new speakers, the smell of warm bread and roasted peppers floating in the air. Tables were set. Bougainvillea curled around the entrance sign, like nature's applause. Then the courier arrived. A single envelope, sealed in red, marked urgent. Inside, a court injunction. Zain. He claimed that during their verbal agreement phase, she had given him permission to act as co-developer and media partner. In the absence of a formal contract, he had filed a motion demanding 40% ownership of Sewa's Nest. Zain read the letter twice, eyes darkening with every line. "I'll call my lawyers," he said, already pulling out his phone. But Adesewa placed a firm hand over his. "No," she said, voice low but steady. "Not this time." Zain looked at her, confused. "You don't have to fight this alone." She met his gaze. "But I do have to fight it. Alone." It wasn't just about the cafe. It was about the fact that every time she began to build something, someone tried to claim it. That afternoon, she walked into the courthouse wearing a navy blue gown and white sneakers. No lawyers, no press, just her truth, and her mother's quiet strength humming in her chest. Zain was already seated, smirking slightly as she entered. He wore a suit that looked like it belonged to someone older. More important, he always dressed like ambition. When the judge asked for an explanation, Zain rose with smooth confidence. "We had a verbal agreement," he said. "I provided strategic branding, facilitated vendor contracts, and social media momentum. It's not just her cafe, it's my marketing engine." Adesewa stood next. "I never signed anything," she began. "He brought ideas, I listened, but that doesn't mean I gave him my legacy." The courtroom fell silent. "I started Sewa's Nest with my mother's recipes and my own 2 hands. I didn't need someone to make it flashy. I needed someone to believe in it, not manipulate it." She paused, her voice catching for just a second. Love doesn't come with ownership, and business doesn't come with entitlement. He wasn't a partner, he was a storm. The judge listened, unmoved, but at the end, granted a temporary reprieve. The cafe could open, but the case would be reviewed in full within 30 days. Outside, reporters asked for comments. She ignored them. Ijoma ran up, arms wide, and wrapped her in a bear hug. "Girl," she whispered fiercely, "you're not just reopening a cafe, you're reopening your soul." Adesewa laughed, a watery, exhausted sound. By the time they returned to the site, the sun was setting. Fairy lights had been strung across the outdoor seating area, flickering gently in the breeze. People were beginning to arrive in clusters. Friends, neighbors, customers from the past, even a few city food critics with DSLR cameras and Instagram lives rolling. Zain waited near the entrance with a small, navy velvet box in his hand. She blinked at it, surprised. "What's this?" He didn't drop to one knee. He didn't say anything grand. He simply opened the box. Inside was a silver spoon, elegant, vintage, and engraved with the words, "To stir new beginnings." She swallowed hard, touched. "I found it at an antique shop in Abeokuta," he said. "Thought it might be more useful than a ring right now." She laughed through the lump in her throat. "It's perfect." That night, she fell asleep for the first time in weeks without nightmares. She dreamt of her mother. They were in the cafe. Everything new, but somehow exactly as it used to be. Her mother stood behind the counter, wearing her favorite yellow geal, smiling as she sprinkled powdered sugar over a batch of puff puff. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You didn't just rebuild a place. You rebuilt your name." When Adesewa woke, her pillow was damp, but her soul felt light. Opening day arrived with sunlight and music. The city had shown up. Lines curled around the block, photos snapped. The scent of jollof quiche and cocoa bread wrapped the street in warmth. She was welcoming guests when she saw her. A woman in her 60s. Ankara skirt, geal tied neatly. Her mother's oldest friend, Mama Risi, waving from the gate. Adesewa rushed to embrace her. "You came!" "I wouldn't miss it, my dear," the woman said, hugging her tight. "And I brought something." She handed over a yellowed envelope, soft at the corners, addressed in familiar handwriting, her mother's. "I was supposed to give this to you," Mama Risi said, "the day your cafe reopened." Adesewa stared at it, her fingers trembling. Inside this envelope was a voice from the past, a blessing, a truth she didn't know she needed. The envelope smelled of old books and lemon balm. Adesewa's hands trembled as she held it, her breath catching at the familiar fragrance, her mother's scent. It had been the background of her childhood, lemon balm tea after school, herbal oils massaged into her temples during headaches, worn pages of dog-eared cookbooks stacked beside the oven. She slipped her thumb beneath the worn edge and opened it slowly, reverently, like unfolding a memory too fragile for speed. Inside was a single sheet of delicate yellowed paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant and rounded, filled with love in every stroke. "My Adesewa." By mid-morning, the internet had claimed them. A single photo, snapped by a journalist as Adesewa wiped icing from Zain's chin during the soft opening, went viral. The caption was simple. She rose from the ashes. He built beside her. Café love story. Within hours, it trended across Lagos Twitter. Food bloggers dissected every dish on the opening menu. Instagram influencers posed in front of the art wall. TikTokers reenacted burn-to-rebuild skits in her cafe's parking lot. Every inch of Sewa's nest was suddenly a backdrop. Some people came for pastries. Others came for proof that love and survival could be aesthetic. At first, Adesewa tried to smile through it. She greeted guests, thanked vloggers, signed cookbooks. She even agreed to a live YouTube segment with a top lifestyle influencer, Nija Glow, who wore 3 outfits during the shoot and kept calling her the Cinnamon Queen of Lagos. Then came the brand proposals. Nija Glow offered her a 6-figure partnership to franchise the vibe and turn Sewa's Nest into a pan-African lifestyle brand, complete with branded aprons, coffee table books, and luxury pop-up cafes across Nigeria and the UK. Her inbox overflowed. "Collaborate with us. Host a baking reality show. Sign with our management team." It should have felt like a dream. Instead, it began to feel like a performance. Suddenly, there were expectations again, metrics to meet, appearances to maintain, a narrative to sustain. And once again, Adesewa found herself losing sleep, scribbling content ideas at 2 a.m., baking batches of pastries just for photo shoots, and taking meetings instead of resting. Zain noticed first. "You haven't smiled in days," he said gently one night, placing a hand on her lower back as she iced cookies for the next day's pop-up brunch. "I'm fine," she lied. He didn't push, but he didn't stay either. He stepped back again, letting her choose her speed, her noise. But the silence that followed was louder than any crowd. Ijoma tried to intervene. Babe, what exactly are you building now? A cafe? Or a circus? I'm managing the momentum, Adesewa said sharply. Or letting it manage you. But she didn't listen. She kept moving, kept producing, kept smiling, until the Nigeglow live interview. They filmed in the cafe's garden section, surrounded by roses and twinkling lights. The YouTuber was already mid-monologue about the rise of culinary queens in Africa when she turned to Adesewa and asked, "So tell us, how does it feel to go from tragedy to triumph, from soot to sweetness, from heartbreak to hashtag?" The lights were hot. The makeup on her face felt like a mask. Her chest tightened. The room spun slightly. And then, she whispered, barely audible, "This was never about going viral." Silence. The camera crew paused. Then, her voice cracked. "It was supposed to be a memory, a place. My mother's laughter and flour and butter. It wasn't meant to be content." The YouTuber looked panicked. The crew exchanged glances. Zain stepped in. Without a word, he walked to her, wrapped her in his arms, and whispered something only she could hear. Then he led her out the back door, past the murals, through the soft glow of evening, back to the car, back to peace. He didn't ask what broke her. He just sat beside her in the quiet of his apartment, handed her a cup of warm cocoa, and waited. When she finally looked up, his eyes were steady. "You don't owe the world your pain packaged as joy," he said softly. Her tears spilled over. "I thought I had to keep proving I was worth the survival," she whispered. "You already are." They sat in silence for a long time, the soft hum of the city far below them. Then he stood, pulled something from the drawer, knelt in front of her, not with a ring, but with something deeper, a journal, the leather-bound one she'd abandoned during the media frenzy. He opened it. Inside were pages he had filled, notes, sketches, memories, quotes from her mother's voice notes, moments she'd shared, feelings she never thought he noticed. "I didn't come to write your story," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you didn't forget it." Her hand trembled as she touched the paper. "Let's get back to the recipe," he added quietly. "The one you started with. A recipe of soul, of memory, of freedom." It was quiet in the cafe that morning. The kind of quiet that felt sacred. The staff had gone home. The lights were dimmed. Outside, the streetlights blinked in rhythm with the late-night calm of the city. And in the center of the cafe, surrounded by memories and warm echoes, stood Zain, holding something in his hands. "Let's not just build memories in bricks," he said softly. "Let's build them in people." He handed her a journal, a thick, leather-bound one, titled, in gold emboss, "The Next Dream." Adesewa took it carefully, fingers grazing the cool surface. When she opened it, her breath caught. Inside were sketches of kitchens, classrooms, smiling faces, photos of her laughing mid-bake, tying aprons on little girls during community visits, gazing out at the mural of her mother. Moments she never realized he'd captured. Snippets of her life, her essence, framed in time. She turned another page and found his handwriting. The Adesewa Owolabi Foundation for Culinary and Entrepreneurial Growth. A school for girls, a program for women, a legacy of sweetness passed on. She looked up at him, stunned. "I want us to build a space," he said, "where girls like the ones your mother taught, like the ones you mentored, like the one you used to be, can learn, grow, and dream through flour and fire." Adesewa pressed the journal to her chest, heart aching in the best way. "You gave me sweetness when I had none," he continued. "Let's give others that too." Her voice broke as she whispered, This means more than any diamond." She didn't wait. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, tears falling freely. In that embrace, there was no sadness left, only strength, only gratitude, only beginning. They announced the foundation 1 month later during the cafe's anniversary celebration. The courtyard was filled with color and music. The scent of lemon scones and hot chocolate lingered in the air. Local press showed up. Foodies came back. But the moment that mattered most wasn't about pastries. It was about purpose. Zain stood beside Adesewa on a makeshift stage, hands clasped gently. "This cafe began with grief," she told the crowd, "but it grew with grace, and now it will live with giving." When the banner of the Adesewa Owolabi Foundation was unveiled, people cheered. Ijoma openly wept as 10 young girls from Makoko, wearing brand new aprons and holding starter kits, walked forward to receive the first scholarships. Each girl carried a spatula, engraved with one phrase: "Bake boldly." Adesewa looked out into the crowd, but her eyes searched for one thing: the jacaranda tree, and he was there. Later that evening, after the crowd dispersed and Lagos resumed its usual pace, they returned to that tree, just the two of them. No speeches, no stage, just two hearts beneath the shade of something that had seen it all. They kissed again, longer this time. No ghosts between them, no grief, no fear, only warmth. She rested her head on his chest, his arms around her. "What now?" she whispered. "Now," he said, "we begin a new recipe." They laughed softly, their future unfolding like rising dough. A recipe written in love, loss, legacy, and laughter. Months passed, and the foundation thrived. The girls baked with confidence. The cafe became not just a destination, but a movement. Zain and Adesewa took weekends off, sometimes. She began hosting workshops. He returned to consulting part-time, only for causes that mattered. They never spoke of the fire again, not as pain, but as spark. Then, one afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the street, a familiar sound rolled down the road. Sirens. A fire truck, the same one from all those months ago. It pulled up directly outside Sewa's nest. The staff froze. Customers paused. Adesewa's heart skipped a beat. But when the back doors opened, out came a team of smiling firefighters, carrying a massive 3-tier cake. Laughter broke across the courtyard. Zain appeared at her side, grinning. "Apparently," he said, "they wanted to return on happier terms." She clutched his hand, heart full, and as the cake was placed on the cafe counter, iced with the words, "To fire that bakes, not breaks," she realized something. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning of their sweetest chapter yet. The sirens screamed again, but this time, no one ran. The bright red fire truck turned onto the cafe's street, horn blaring in triumph. Passers-by looked up, confused, curious. Some old customers even froze in fear, instinctively remembering the flames of a year ago. But then they saw it, a massive, ribbon-covered cake being carefully carried down from the truck bed. Frosted with swirls of pale pink and gold, the inscription was clear: "Congratulations to the first graduates of the Adesewa Owolabi Foundation." Adesewa laughed through the tears that rushed too quickly to her eyes. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. What once destroyed her had now come back, not to break, but to bless. Inside the cafe, a quiet reverence filled the space. The memory wall had grown since the grand reopening. Alongside the painted mural of her mother were new additions: Polaroids of smiling customers, a framed photo of Zain and the girls from Makoko holding up aprons, snapshots of Ijoma guiding press tours, old menu designs, and handwritten letters from customers thanking her for rebuilding more than just a cafe. "You reminded me that Lagos can be soft. Your puff-puff helped me through a breakup. This place smells like love." Each note was a heartbeat on the wall. Adesewa stood beside it that day in a dress covered with flower smudges, welcoming the 10 graduating girls who had now mastered everything from basic baking to running a budget. They wore matching headscarves and big dreams, and each received a certificate, a toolkit, and a scholarship to start their own baking ventures. Zain stepped beside her, his arm brushing hers. He whispered, "You've turned flour into futures." She smiled, "And you turned grief into gold." He didn't answer, but his hand slipped into hers. Steady, sure. Later that week, he had one more surprise. A slim envelope on her pillow, monogrammed with her initials. Inside, a plane ticket to Paris, and a letter. The École de Pâtisserie. 6 weeks. All expenses paid. You once said it was a dream. Let's make it a memory. She stared at the paper, stunned. I can't leave now. Yes, he interrupted gently. You can. You've given everything to others. Now, take something back for you. And so she went. 6 weeks in a quiet villa outside Paris. Mornings filled with croissants and cream. Afternoons spent learning from chefs whose hands told stories in sugar. Evenings where she sat on the patio, wrapped in a wool shawl, her mama's miracle apron still tied around her waist. She wrote every night, letters she never sent. To her younger self, filled with encouragement. To her mother, filled with gratitude. To Zain, filled with love. She didn't miss Lagos. She missed him, but she was also rediscovering herself, outside the chaos and caffeine, outside the brand, outside the buzz. When she returned, Lagos welcomed her, like home always does, with honking danfos, smoky suya stands, and music from every street corner. But Sewa's nest welcomed her like a heartbeat she'd been missing. The cafe was packed. The scent of yam muffins and vanilla filled the air. The staff moved like poetry in motion. Ijeoma, now officially head of PR and events, waved at her from across the counter. Everything was thriving. Everything had continued, because she had built something that didn't need her to survive, but always made room for her to return. As she stepped into the kitchen, something caught her eye. A batch of croissants, perfectly layered, but inside one, folded delicately into the golden pocket of dough, was a small velvet box. Her breath caught. She reached for it, heart racing. Opened it. Inside, a simple ring, elegant, gold. No diamonds, just a single engraved word. Risen. She turned and found Zain standing at the door. No speeches, no crowd, just them. You taught me to rise, he said quietly. Not just in business, but in love. Tears shimmered in her eyes. She didn't need to speak. She only nodded. Yes, yes to everything. They kissed in the kitchen, surrounded by warmth, flour in her hair, cinnamon in the air, Lagos humming outside the window like a lullaby. And in her heart, she heard it. Her mother's voice, soft, proud, eternal. Baking heals, if you let it. If this story touched your heart, don't leave just yet. Hit the like button, subscribe for more powerful Nigerian dramas, and share this video with someone who believes in second chances. Drop a comment below. What would you do if a stranger helped rebuild your dream? Your support keeps these stories alive.